1990, Britain was at a crossroads. Margaret Thatcher was still in power, but although she had won 3 consecutive general elections as party leader, she was now incredibly unpopular and was rightly seen as an electoral liability to her party. Some of this was due to the implementation by her government of the poll tax, a highly regressive local government tax where everyone had to pay the same amount irrespective of their income. Indeed, when poll tax bills fell onto the British public's doorsteps in April 1990, Thatcher was to receive the worst satisfaction rating of any Prime Minister up until this point, with just 23% of the public saying they were satisfied with her leadership. Thatcher was also damaged by the resignation of her Chancellor Nigel Mansel the previous year, and by her increasingly dictatorial style of leadership, which was even beginning to alienate those who had been with her since the beginning. The resignation of Geoffrey Howe would eventually inflict a fatal blow, but that was somewhere off at the beginning of the year. Popular culture, the year started with the premiere episode of both One Foot in the Grave and Mr. Bean. One Foot in the Grave focused on the character of Victor Meldrew, played by Richard Wilson, who faced the ordinary challenges of everyday life with increasing frustration, leading him to express his exasperation by uttering his catchphrase, "I don't believe it." And Mr. Bean, played by Rowan Atkinson, featured a different type of struggle as Mr. Bean tried to navigate the world with bizarre and ridiculous consequences. January 1990 also saw the publication of the Taylor report into the Hillsborough disaster, which had killed 95 Liverpool fans in the April of the previous year. Lord Justice Taylor rightly blamed the police for the disaster, but it would take many years and concerted campaigning for the families to get official acknowledgement that the victims on the day were unlawfully killed. To this day, those responsible have not been brought to justice. Taylor recommended that all top division stadiums be converted to all-seater stadiums by 1994. Football would change a great deal in the 1990s with the creation of the Premier League and the bidding war for television rights leading to a commercialisation of the game, which would create an increasing divide between the clubs and the communities they served.
Good evening. More than 100 people have been injured tonight in serious rioting across central London. What began as a peaceful mass demonstration against the poll tax by more than 50,000 people ended in violence.
In March 1990, it seemed that the British public had been pushed to breaking point, with rioting in Brixton on the 9th of March and in central London on the 31st of March. It's rare for a change in tax policy to result in such an extreme expression of public indignation, but the introduction of the poll tax led to a mass protest of 200,000 people, with scenes on the day reminiscent of civil war, with police charging at protesters on horseback. This was a low point for the Thatcher government, with polling indicating a 20-point lead in the polls for the Labour Party, fuelling expectations that were Thatcher to lead the Conservative Party into a fourth election, Labour would assume office with a landslide. Before we had YouTube for such things, You've Been Framed, which first aired in April 1990, compiled clips sent in by members of the public who had captured humorous moments of things going wrong, often in painful ways for the person being filmed. On a more serious note, April 1990 also featured the longest riot in a prison, with Strangeways Prison in Manchester being taken over by its inmates for 25 days. A subsequent report by Lord Wolfe concluded that conditions in the prison had been intolerable and recommended major reform of the UK prison system. April 1990 also saw the opening of the first Aldi store in the UK, with the opening of Netto and Poundland coming later in the year.
Mr. Speaker, doesn't the Prime Minister remember telling me just a few short weeks ago that she thought the community charge will be very popular. Does she still believe that? And if she does, why is she sending her ministers off in every direction, desperately searching for an escape route from the poll tax?
The May 1990 local elections spelled bad news for the Conservative Party, with the Labour Party securing a notional share of the vote of 44% to the Conservative Party's 33%. Local elections are always an opportunity for voters to send a message to an incumbent government, and given the level of concern about the poll tax, with 20% of the public refusing to pay the tax according to the BBC, it wasn't a surprise that the local elections reflected this public mood. May 1990 is also famous for then Minister for Agriculture John Gummer attempting to feed his daughter a British beef burger amidst fears that British beef could lead to a form of mad cow disease spreading to humans. Unfortunately, the burger was too hot, so Gummer had to eat the burger himself. July 1990 would see England knocked out of the World Cup in a penalty shootout against West Germany in the semi-final. The BBC coverage of Italia 90 included Pavarotti's Nessun Dorma as the theme tune, which catapulted the track to number 3 in the UK singles charts and made it an unexpectedly popular choice for karaoke singers in the UK following the contest. Other sporting highlights of the year included Stephen Hendry beating Steve Davis to become snooker world champion for the first time at the age of 21, and the retirement of F1 driver Nigel Mansel. July 1990 also saw the bombing of the London Stock Exchange and the murder of Conservative MP Ian Gow by the IRA, which Margaret Thatcher described in her biography as an irreplaceable loss.
Good evening. Sir Geoffrey Howe, Mrs Thatcher's longest-serving colleague throughout her years in power, turned on her in the Commons today and accused her of risking the nation's future. He was explaining for the first time why he resigned as Deputy Prime Minister 12 days ago. Most MPs had expected a coded diplomatic speech. Instead, years of resentment and frustration were compressed into a bitter attack on Mrs Thatcher and her attitude to Europe. He called on Conservative MPs to consider what he described as their conflict of loyalties and made a challenge for the leadership of the party almost inevitable.
Geoffrey Howe's resignation speech was the final nail in the coffin for Margaret Thatcher's leadership of the Conservative Party, and just one day after the devastating speech, Michael Heseltine threw his hat into the ring to replace her as leader. To retain the leadership and the Prime Ministership, Thatcher needed to top the poll in the first round with a lead of at least 15 percentage points. But she was just a few votes short. Her instinct was to fight on, but after speaking with cabinet colleagues, she realised that the game was up and that it was time for her to resign. In the leadership contest that followed, John Major topped the poll in the second round and was confirmed as leader unopposed after his rivals pulled out of the contest. After 11.5 years, the Thatcher era was finally over and John Major was to become Prime Minister.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're leaving Downing Street for the last time after 11.5 wonderful years, and we're very happy that we leave the United Kingdom in a very, very much better state than when we came here 11.5 years ago.
John Major would inherit the premiership with the UK already in recession, with unemployment on the rise, and faced with a crisis in the Gulf that came about after Saddam Hussein invaded the neighbouring country of Kuwait on the 2nd of August 1990. His biggest asset on assuming the premiership was that he wasn't Thatcher, but she'd already said in an unguarded comment that she would make a good backseat driver. The Conservative Party would receive an immediate poll bounce following the replacement of Major with Thatcher, but leading a party that had been in power for 11.5 years to another election victory seemed a very challenging prospect. 1991 would be a crucial year for Major's leadership. After all, many Conservative backbenchers must have been quietly asking themselves, what on earth have we done? And they must have wondered whether this unassuming man from a working class background, in many ways the embodiment of the Thatcherite idea that anyone could rise to the top, could really fill the shoes of the political titan they had just replaced. As 1990 drew to a close, all of this remained to be seen.